Hey everybody, it's Matt Mitrich, the alternate story. I'm again here with my wife Elena, and we are going to review episode 2 of The Man in the High Castle, which is titled Sunrise. So Elena, what was this episode about?
So there were several different things going on with several different characters. The first being Juliana being in the diner.
We remembered the characters' names now. It's really
Yay!
exciting. Although we got a cheat sheet over here.
Yes, total
so
cheating.
what are you going to do?
It is what it is. I have 100 and some students to remember, okay?
And you can't remember 5 character names?
No.
Okay,
but it's full for the school year. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So anyways, Juliana has a job now in the diner. And because she wants to pay back, what's his name?
Joe Blake.
Joe, okay? So she wants to pay back Joe for giving her a hotel room and kind of just helping her out and those kinds of things. You know, he's a friendly stranger. Mm-hmm. And so she is working in the diner and meets a older gentleman who is folding origami. And so she assumes that's the contact that she's supposed to pass on the film to. Mm-hmm. He ends up being not such a nice guy. And when she goes to meet him to pass the film on, he ends up attacking her and trying to throw her over the dam.
If we can back up a little bit, it turns out he's actually an undercover German agent who's working to sort of like wipe out the resistance. And we find this out because Joe Blake put in a call to Smith, John Smith, I remember his name, back in New York, who tells him that and says to stay out of it. But Joe ends up watching his copy of the film, and this seems to inspire him to go and save Juliana's life. Although in the end, he didn't really do much. Juliana was able to take care of herself. So yay, Keto.
Yes.
And that was pretty much the story in Kansas City. Now there was 2 other kind of storylines going on. I will say, if we could, but let's just say that one in Kansas City was the A line. B line was, or Frank is in prison with the Japanese. They're trying to figure out where did Juliana went to because they think she has the film, the Grasshopper Lies Heavy, and they want to get that. They torture him, beat him, threaten him, but what seems to really get him is that, Frank, as we mentioned in the last episode, Frank is part Jewish, if you can be part Jewish, and that would also mean his sister and her children, her children are also part Jewish. Interestingly enough, they never mention what happened to the husband or father or anything like that. But regardless,
that's right. Yeah,
I never mentioned that. So it's like,
who cares about him? She just spent the whole day somewhere else and not at home.
We don't even know if he's dead or gone or whatever. He's just not there. But that's just something I remember from that. Anywho, they threatened to kill them because they're Jewish, and the Japanese are aligned with the Reich's racial laws, which is probably the dumbest thing in the entire episode, but I'll let that slide. I'll go into a rant later about that. In the end, though, Frank doesn't give up on Juliana, partly because I guess he's still in love with her, partly because there was another guy in the cell next to him who was telling him don't do it, to stand up to them. Mm. He's taken to get shot, and at the last minute, though, we see a scene that woman who's I don't know if we talked about this in the last episode, was this woman who was on the bus that Juliana was taking to Kansas City, stole from her and took a lot of her stuff, including some fake films that weren't the Grasshoppers Lies Heavy, it was something else. So they realize it's like, we're tracing the wrong lead. So at the last minute, Frank has survived, but it turns out his sister and children were killed. They were in a room and they were gassed, and so they're dead. So yeah, that sucks, and I'll explain why more of that sucks later. I just want to finish up the plot summary really quick. The last storyline is back with John Smith. We get to meet his family. Everyone is a good little
soldier,
good little Nazis in America. Mm-hmm. And the important thing is that at some point he's taking a car into the city, he is attacked by the resistance. They kill the driver and the guy he was driving with, and he's able to fend them off, though, with a pistol, which I thought was a little... okay.
They had machine guns.
And there was 4 of them. Maybe they just want to show how much of a badass John Smith was, and that's fine, but at the same time, he got really lucky that all those... that he was attacked by the most incompetent resistance force that the Americans had to offer at the time. And which was also kind of weird because later on he kind of admonishes another Nazi soldier, agent, whatever, about saying like, oh, I can't believe by comparing these men to bugs, and it's like bugs don't kill German soldiers. Like Yeah, but at the same time, they didn't manage to kill you either. It's like, even though you just had a pistol, and he even ran out of ammo at one point. He had he just he just got lucky because they also ran out of ammo and they had a chain, so he was able to get in and shoot them. And it was, again, it was a fun action scene, I guess, and I guess it works for making John Smith kind of look like a badass. But at the same time, it sort of was a little ridiculous because, again, how did 4 people with machine guns who had the car cornered and nowhere to go and the driver shot, how did they manage not to kill this one guy? I mean, from what we remember the last episode, it was like some of the people in the Resistance are former soldiers too, so how badly did they fuck this up? But then again, that's not really what made me angry. What really made me angry was... Oh, can you give me the cheat sheet?
Well, let me go back to that scene. That scene kind of made me sad because we saw John Smith's family first. Mm-hmm. And so it almost... I want to hate him because he's one of the bad guys.
Right.
But it made me so sad that he had children at the table and his wife was there. They were having breakfast. And at the same time, he's going to a job where he's getting shot at. And it just made me sad that, like, you just saw his children at home, and, in the end, maybe he's a bad guy, but he's also a dad, and, those kids almost lost their father that day, and so, I don't know, the heart maybe I have too much heart.
Well, no, you don't want villains in any show to be one-dimensional. You want villains to be somewhat sympathetic, even if they are the bad guys, even if what they stand for is bad. It's that whole banality of evil that we kind of talked about last time. It's that... did we talk about it next time? But the whole idea that, what was the scariest thing about the Nazis was that these weren't monsters, these weren't comic book villains, they were just regular people. There are people who did awful things and then went home to their families and helped their kid with their homework. That's something to remember, is that these are very human people, right. And any human is capable of probably doing some of the things they did given the right situation. I'm not saying that there's some people who are inherently born evil. No, I'm just saying if history was different, it would have led people making different decisions and being told and believing that certain things were right that aren't in our own current timeline. So, yeah. But anyway, I want to talk about something that really bugs me. So, Frank, back in storyline B, Frank was being interrogated by Inspector Kiddo. Keto? Let's go Keto. Yeah. And he was the one who tweeted at me the other time. And so thank you again to make sure I get his name right. Joel de la Fuente. I'm sorry, man, if I can't pronounce your name. I better double check that as well. But anywho, he said that really stupid line, and I don't blame him. I'll blame the writers for this, because I'll explain why I blame the writers for this. That we've adopted the Reich's racial laws. Why did Japan do that? Yeah, I understand the Germans really didn't like the Jews, but the German racial laws also. The central kind of like part of the racial laws was that Germanic white people are the best people ever.
Right.
And the Japanese aren't Germanic white people. So you adopted certain of their laws? Okay, why? Again, it doesn't make any sense. Right. It's like you're in a Cold War with Germany. Germany and Japan are locked in a Cold War. They're enemies of each other. One of them thinks that they're completely racial inferiors, and so the people who are considered racial inferiors decide we better adopt those same racial rules. It's like in our own Cold War. If the United States were like, we really don't like the Soviets, but we're going to adopt communism because it seems like a good idea. What? It doesn't make any sense. The Germans. Racial laws put the Japanese near the bottom, regardless of that they were allies at the time. They're allies of convenience because the Germans didn't really have many allies. So it was useful to have the Japanese as the allies because they could distract the Western powers by gobbling up their Pacific Empires. But at the same time, the idea that after that was over and now that they have no reason to be allies anymore, that the Japanese would still adopt this, it doesn't make any sense too. And there are Jewish communities in East Asia, and from what I remember, the Japanese never followed those racial policies during the war, and at the same time it was considered surprisingly enough a safe haven for certain Jews to flee to Japanese controlled areas or China or just places in the Pacific. So again, it doesn't make much sense why they would do that, especially when they're locked in this Cold War, they have no reason to do it. And it's my issue I had with the last episode. It's like, why are the Japanese so subservient to the Germans? What does the Germans have that the Japanese don't? Presumably, Japan must have their own nuclear bomb, so they have no reason to be afraid of the Germans all that much. And again, we also saw that too with with the trade minister, which his name was Nobusuke Tagomi.
It's good enough. I don't know why you think I speak Japan.
Because you watched the you speak Japan.
Japanese. Sorry.
It's someone's name, not exactly a language.
Okay, it's Black Friday and I've been shopping since really early in the morning. That's my excuse.
That's your excuse. Okay, I can't pronounce it either, but. It's just like he's talking with these two German representatives, and they're worried about this tapes, and they're saying they're going to take care of it, and they don't care, and then the trade minister's like, well, the person who says our sovereign nation's like, and the German's like, yeah, we don't care, and it's like, yeah, I understand part of this diplomacy back and forth. These people don't actually like each other, so this kind of thing is probably usual, but it just seemed a little too like the Germans were a little too like, what are you going to do to us? We can do whatever we want in this place, and I'm like, why? There's a neutral zone between the two spheres of influence, between the Japanese and the Germans in North America, for a reason. It's because if they were right up against each other, they'd be fighting. They couldn't handle it. That's why there's this neutral zone.
Yeah, if they fully agreed and wanted to be together, they would be.
Yeah, what did the Germans or Japanese to worry about? Why didn't they even need a neutral zone if they were willing to fight it out to begin with?
Exactly.
It just doesn't make any sense. The Japanese are just way too subservient to the Germans. They should be able to stand up for themselves a little bit better. The idea that again, I'm not condoning anything the Japanese did. I'm not going to say that somehow they were completely blameless. They didn't do horrible things during the war. I mean, the Korean women used as sex slaves is a very good example. But at the same time, I find it really hard to believe that Japan would adopt the Nazi racial laws, especially because if they applied it literally, it would mean the Japanese themselves would be considered inferior humans. So it's really stupid. It doesn't make sense why they literally had a room designed to gas people, which I presumably are to gas Jews. Again, why are they even bothering to look for them? Why do they care? It would have been better if the inspector said, I'm just going to turn you over to the Germans and your sister and her kids. I could see that. That to me seems completely...
it's kind of like, you maybe broke some laws for another country, so we gotta.
Well, but they would not be German citizens. But I'm saying I doubt that the Germans would have said no to the Jews. I'm sure they would want to exterminate them. So it makes more sense to say that, other than the Japanese being complicit in carrying it out. It just doesn't make sense because other states that are allied with Germany, even in Europe, ignored the German racial laws, like Hungary and Italy and other places like that. They actually didn't carry them out. It wasn't until after they were later occupied by German forces that the laws were carried out, because it wasn't the people doing it by themselves. It was the Germans helping. And I'm not saying that things were easy for Jews in Hungary and Italy during the time, but I am saying no one was taken to concentration camps in those countries until the Germans came in. So again, if those countries, which are made out of white people, can say, screw these racial laws, we're not doing it, why did Japan have to adopt it? It was really, really dumb. It was literally just a really stupid thing the episode did. And it's, yeah. So, and I've been talking constantly about this.
No, it's okay.
Is there anything you want to comment?
Well, to comment something very minor, that I probably should have looked up the history a little more of the medical terms of this, but they checked to see if Frank was circumcised. They made a point to show that they were going to check that.
Yeah.
My question is, now most male children are circumcised.
Yeah.
So, my question is, when do we start doing that as a general thing when little boys are born? Because, that wouldn't mean that he was Jewish. Little Christian boys, little Muslim boys, little atheist baby boys, whatever, might have been circumcised at that point. So, is it because of the alternate history that's going on that still only Jewish children are being circumcised? Or have we, in this universe, checked to see if it's more medically sound to be circumcising all little boys? So I'd be really curious to see if I could go back and look up the history, which I teach child development, and my child development class in the next month or so are going to be talking about newborns. That's through newborns on their final in December, so I'll probably have that answer in a few weeks.
It just would depend on when circumcision just became adopted,
a medical
at least in America,
thing, yeah.
As this is actually healthier to do. And again, I don't know when that happened.
Yeah. But in this,
I actually wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen
in this universe. Or in this...
I don't understand what that question
is. In this alternate history, maybe it wouldn't happen at all because
it's possible. But if it only happened in our own history in the 1980s, then yeah, it's fine for him not to be circumcised, even though he's not Jewish.
So I'll have to look it up.
That's what I'm trying to say.
So maybe I'll have that date in the next few weeks because we'll be talking about it in my classes.
or anyone in the comments knows, please leave a comment and tell us. So that's one way of doing it. Is there any other things you want to talk about this episode?
Well, I'm curious. Okay, again, the girl and the fashionista in me and stuff is wondering, like, okay, Juliana had all her stuff stolen. So they've been now, what, maybe 2-3 days in a hotel and stuff. Mm-hmm. Where are her clothes? Why is her makeup flawless? Why is her hair looking beautiful? Who's helping her? There's no way that man gave her, a stranger, enough money to get her hair and makeup and make her look decent. Nor did she make enough working waitressing. Well, so maybe I'm being a girl for a second here. That's fine.
She only worked one day too.
Right, and so, he gave her, and she went and gave her money to him for helping her get even a hotel room, because they're not even staying in the same hotel room.
Was she wearing the same clothes as the last episode?
No, I'd have to go back and look, but I'm almost pretty positive. I mean, it looks like she's wearing dark colors no matter what. Which I find is an interesting clothing choice, that they're really not making a big deal about what she's wearing or adopting a lot of the 60s styles. They're just really sticking to like a lot of the plain pencil skirts, plain shirt, nothing where it's outgoing, and maybe that's just her personality where she's a very plain Jane. But because her sister Trudy in the last episode had a little bit more of the whole 60s style going with the type of hat she was wearing and the curl of her hair.
I don't remember her wearing a hat at all.
She's wearing a knit hat.
Okay. Well,
this is why you invited me.
Okay, true. We got to also remember though that this isn't the 1960s as we know it, so they're allowed a few liberties to not match with the 60s, because it's not the 60s.
No, it's totally not. I mean,
in fact, I think when you looked at the Smith family, they kind of looked very 50ish.
Yes, I would agree. I would totally agree with. I was going to add that next. Yeah.
So, which again, I think this is 1962, so the 50s haven't been
pretty close,
pretty recent. But at the same time, it looks like they're definitely going for. People are much more conservative, perhaps, in this history, especially when you keep talking about decadence and social deviance and things like that. So it's perhaps we shouldn't be. We're not going to see any hippies, I don't think.
No, I don't think that's going to come across.
They referenced some a kid in John Smith's son's school who apparently had long hair and clothes that didn't fit the dress code and stuff like that. But otherwise, you didn't see him, so...
Right. Well, I almost argue, like, based on Trudy's style, it's based on my knowledge of fashion history, would be that she is starting the styles of the hippies based on what Trudy was wearing in the first episode.
But the 60s
style of the hair and the curl of her hair, and, like, she had a little bit of a bell-bottom to her pant.
I thought the bell-bottoms were more 70s.
60s and 70s. 70s we made them bigger by adding fabric.
Well, we also have to remember that the hippies were just like one subculture within the 60s. And you can't just say that everyone dressed like they were a hippie.
But I wonder if some people that are part of the resistance kind of have a freer spirit as well.
True, but that's the worst thing you want to do if you're part of resistance, is to draw attention to yourself as part of the resistance. If you're I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like the person more likely to dress like a... And again, I'm going to use the term again just for the sake of argument. A hippie is probably not the type of person who's going to cut off a car in New York City and shoot up the people inside.
No, because the guys in John Smith, they look like regular Joes. Yeah,
you don't want to draw attention to yourself. You want to look like that you're a conformist for as long as possible until you strike, because you don't want to. Because then what's the point if you can't strike out?
But I still want to know who's running a curling iron through Juliana's hair.
Yeah, you're probably right. It was the hair.
She should look a little bit. I mean, I get that she's in a hotel room and she's getting a little shower and things like that, but
was there a shower?
Well, whatever. She's in a hotel room. She has access to running water and such.
Fair enough.
Even if it's like a hostel where they have to go down the hall for a bathroom. I don't know if you've ever stayed in a hostel, but in Europe I did.
But I know what you're talking about.
And you go down the hall to use the bathroom and shower and whatever, you share with your floor.
Like a dormitory.
Right, kind of. And so I'm curious if even if they're in that type of environment, she's getting a shower in, but I don't know. She's looking a little too flawless for. I don't know. It's TV, movies.
No, it's
Hollywood.
It's fine because that's
not realistic.
Those things bother me. Those things are part of the overall show, and sometimes people have to look out for that. I mean, you don't want someone looking like nothing's bothered them. You don't want someone looking like nothing is wrong when they spent the whole week supposedly according to the story in the same clothes and they look immaculate. It's that someone who goes into the water and comes out and then literally the next scene their hair's dry. Right. It's like, wait, we just saw them get pulled out of the water. Why do they seem dry? They should be wet.
Right, because when we watch recently, I don't know if we want to mention other movies or shows, but when we saw The Martian in theaters, at some point he loses a lot of weight because he's not eating, and so it's the same thing. Like that, he grows facial hair because he doesn't have to shave for anyone, and so he doesn't care. And so it's the same thing. Like, she should, maybe her hair should have stayed wet, or, like, been put up in a bun and called it a day or something. She's looking a little too perfect, in my opinion. And that's just the girl in me. I don't know, but I wouldn't have walked out looking that flawless.
Well, any final thoughts?
I think it's good so far. I'm interested to see where some things are going to go and where they're going to take certain stories. And I'm interested to see Frank's character develop more. Now that he's pretty upset, obviously, the tragedy of losing his sister and his niece and nephew, I think is going to definitely change his character. And he's going to have a great character development coming up.
I'm concerned with the direction the show's going, especially how they portray the Japanese. It seems more like they're just portraying them as Asian Nazis, and that's not entirely true with how history played out. Again, I'm not condoning what the Japanese did. They did some awful things. The Bataan Death March is another good example. They didn't exactly treat the people they conquered all that well. But at the same time, to say that they are exactly not the Nazis is not true, and it sort of ignores some of the issues that came about as the Germans and Japanese tried to build this sort of relationship during the war. You got to remember, part of it also was geographical reasons, but the Japanese and the Germans didn't really work all that much together, and there was probably, besides geographical reasons, other reasons for that as well. That being said, I still think it was an okay episode. It had some good moments. I liked the bits in Kansas City. The bits with John Smith were all right, but I'm not enjoying so far, again, like what I said, how that they're portraying the Japanese, this alternate Japanese culture. It just doesn't seem right to me. It seems kind of has holes in it, and I complained about this in the last episode. I'm complaining about it now, and I'm really hoping that when we finally watch the third episode and review it, I can say something happier about it.
I also want to see where they're going to take religion in this.
Oh, yeah.
Because the character, what was his name again? That Juliana meets having a Bible, and the Bibles are illegal.
The SD guy, the undercover German.
Why are Bibles illegal? I thought, are all the Germans atheists? I mean, I know they don't like Judaism, but do they, what's going on there? I thought that this was going to be a Christian nation, and maybe that's a minor thing, and they don't want to make a big deal about religion. I don't know, but they made a big deal about the Bible being illegal, and then her going to a bookstore to get one, and hit the bookstore owner digging in under tables and stuff to get her one. I've just thought that was interesting. I'm curious to see if there's going to be any more references to religion at all, and where that's going to go.
Well, I know from history that while the Germans weren't that actively against the various Christian churches, they at the same time didn't exactly approve of it. They wanted loyalty to the state and to the party, and the church took away from that. While there were certainly religious figures, both in Germany and other countries, including here in America, who supported the Nazis and their goals, there were also priests and other religious figures who ended up in concentration camps for being even remotely critical of the Nazis.
St. Maximilian Kolbe being one of them,
Yeah. In a post-war world where Germans won, maybe they'd be a little bit more active about it, but I find that hard to believe sometimes because, again, Germany was predominantly a Christian country at the time the Nazis came to power, and I find it hard that they could somehow wipe out all Bibles
that was really
And what about the Italians? I mean, for far as we know, the Italians are still independent, and smack dab in the middle of Rome is the Vatican. I find it hard to believe that they can get the Italians to agree about getting rid of all Bibles.
I don't see that happening.
I don't see that happening either. So I found it was a little silly.
The Bibles are everywhere.
It was a little silly to say the Bible was banned and no one had it anymore. At least, granted, I guess that only really applied to the neutral zone and the West Coast. I mean, they never actually said Bibles are banned in the East Coast or the German-controlled areas. And again, with Japan, I don't know much about how they treated Christian religion. I know that Japan's not predominantly a Christian country, but at the same time, even I found it a little difficult to believe that they would wipe out the Bible entirely. Again, I can't. If someone in the comments knows, maybe I'll do some more research, but maybe I guess the Bible wouldn't be completely, it might be rewritten a little bit, it might be a very censored version, who knows, but it's hard to believe that they would completely wipe out the entire religious structure of Christianity now, at least on the West Coast, or especially in the neutral zone either. Because as far as I know, the neutral zone is neutral. Neither one goes in. So again, as long as they don't piss off either side, the neutral zone can pretty much do whatever they want. They keep talking about how it's lawless. So then why is it so hard to find a Bible?
Yeah, it was like,
and who's running
I'm going to shut the door and close the blinds and get you this Bible and put it in another book.
And there's trains moving through it. And again, who's regulating that? Who's paying for that? It's one of those things like, okay, this lawless place that apparently has a lot of rules. Someone's enforcing it so that people are afraid to even show it. So again, I don't know.
So yeah, I'm curious to see where they're going to go with the whole like religion. If there's even going to be brought up again at all. Maybe it'll never be talked about again. Who knows?
Yeah, but so yeah, that's our review of the episode Sunrise. I like to Sunrise, right?
Yep.
Okay, too late now to take it back. I can edit it maybe. So we'll be back next time for episode 3. I'm Matt Mitch with Shelton Story. This is Elena. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.